Like you do not need a mentor. You need someone to grow with you.
Right.
And like that's something that a lot of beginners have trouble with, is that, oh, I need someone to learn from. And that's not the fact.
Yeah.
Like you need someone to learn with
Yes.
in order to grow up together.
Yes.
And I think that's the best part of hacking, when you can just, critical think.
Right.
Okay, like 30 seconds before we started recording, just say that again for the mic.
Yeah, I never watched the podcast, so I don't know what we are going to talk about.
Come on, man, you're killing me.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, of course.
All right, guys, we're here. We're in Japan.
Yeah, in Akone. That's awesome.
The live hacking event is a wrap, and we've just been relaxing for the past couple. I don't know if you'd call it maybe relaxing. We've been doing some pretty intense sightseeing for the past couple days.
The hiking was not relaxing.
Yeah. But yeah, what did you guys think of the live hacking event? Any lessons learned or takeaways we wanna share?
Man, I thought that the live hacking event was really cool in Tokyo and everything. I think like the lesson I learned is that how to pick fights, in a way that there is some bugs where you need to argue more than others, and you do not have the time to argue on every bugs when you're on a live hacking event scene. So you need to really pick like what are the most impactful bugs, and which one do you take time to explain to the program, and which one do you just gotta quit arguing about it. So that was a good lesson, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the bugs that had come out of this event, especially the things that were shown at Show and Tell, were some of the most unexpected things, I'd say. Like, I was very surprised at, like, honestly, a lot of them were very, like, simple, straightforward, like, things that in hindsight I was like, oh, I should have just, I'm surprised I didn't see that, or, whatever it is. And some of them were just, like, insanely big brained. Like, I don't want to go into too many details, but there was one with, like, you would put, like, the same parameter in twice, and I would probably would have never even tried anything like that.
I mean that, like, a lot of the bugs were simple technically, but you needed to find how to do it. And so this is like the frugality of bug bounty, when you find like something really easy to reproduce, but at the same time you need to be really creative about how you find those kind of bugs. And so there is a lot of people that went the extra miles in the recon, because we had like a small scope and there was so much out of the box thinking, and it's really inspiring to see the show and tells.
Yeah, man, that was the thing for me on this one. I have a lot of takeaways from this one. It was a little bit of a challenging one for me personally. So I was sitting in the hot bath with Nagli last night, kind of running over what kind of stuff that we could have done differently. And just like you guys said, there were just a lot of bugs at this event that were just like, wow, why would you even try that? So definitely thinking out of the box. And then I think another really thing that became really clear to me this event was, the team made it very clear that, like, if you are able to impact core components in PII, that they don't care, you that is what they want, know. And exactly. So scope is not a problem at that point, right? As long as their users are getting protected, which I think is really great, but it's something that I didn't prioritize quite as well, during this event. And I think the hackers that went around the scope and then found ways to attack the core assets in PII, I think they did the best this event, and that's really impressive.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things we actually talked about this like last week on the last episode about where's sort of the ethical boundary about going out of scope, and like, is it okay to go out of scope if it provides impact? And I think one sort of caveat to this is it wasn't really like out of scope per se. It was more like out of scope for the event. It would be in scope for the main program. And I think like worst case scenario, if you had really gone like out of scope, they just move it to the main program. But they were really looking for things that would cause impact to this special scope that was being targeted, and just in general to the program as a whole. And so I think it was really awesome that they said that was okay for you to sort of bend it a little bit, as long as you're able to provide impact, because they have that awesome relationship with the researchers.
I think that every company should do that when they have the maturity, because like I don't like scope in the sense of domains, right? But I like scope about the sense of where you are impacting the data, right? So in my opinion, scope shouldn't be like there is this subdomain that is in scope, but the other one is not in scope. Imagine that you have a subdomain that is exposed you do not even know about, and there is direct link to the database with a SQL injection. This is the same database that is impacted with the same data, but it wouldn't be in scope. And so I prefer when program says, for instance, the core database is in scope, but we do not care about the entry point, right? And there is other programs that are really mature about third parties, because European companies actually, if there is a third party leaking data or anything, they are still responsible. The first party is always responsible. And so it's really cool when you can hunt on third parties also. So I really wish we had more maturities in that realm.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to see, and I think like you said, that's something that's a more mature program decision, but it's really awesome to see, and it actually makes the most sense from a technical perspective too, because like you run into these programs where it's like, okay, this domain is in scope. Okay, well, what the heck does that mean? Because 9 times out of 10, that domain is resolving to an IP that's a load balancer, and that load balancer serves many different applications. So if you're saying, okay, this IP is in scope, well, then I can modify the host header on that specific request and get routed to all sorts of different applications. Sure. Are those in scope? And so it's cool to see a program, like you said, take responsibility as the first party, and do that. The other big takeaway for me from this event was, I guess, very thoroughly auditing JavaScript files that are not necessarily on the main asset, And for me, one of the things that I knew before this event, and I actually did, but didn't thoroughly assess, was lazy loaded Webpack files, right?
Interesting.
And so, going that extra mile to, open up the core main.js file, dump all of the, dynamically loaded JavaScript files that are also, in that same folder, grabbing all those down, and then making sure you're thoroughly auditing all those to get all the API resources you need. That would have made a big difference for me during this event.
Yeah, and like it's very counterintuitive, because if you're hacking on that app and you look at it in Burp, you just go to a login page, you're not going to see all of the other modules being loaded because they're lazy loaded. It's only going to load the things that are necessary. And so if you just see, oh, there's this JS file, and you just see only a couple little endpoints or whatever, and that's it, that you have to explicitly start to pull apart those JavaScript files, and you're going to find the other functionality because it's in there. You just have to go and get it. And if you don't log in or something, say it's an admin portal, right? You can't log in. Well, you might not see those, but they're there. Yeah. And if you go deeper, you may actually be able to access things within those files, and you'll see the other functionality, but it'll take more time. And something like JSWZL, I think, we've talked about this before, tools like that are designed for analyzing JavaScript functionality, those are really going to come into play as more and more like React apps and that kind of stuff that are doing this type of behavior come into play.
Yeah, I think I found so many bugs that were so easy, but just like hidden in some JavaScript calls that were made by the front end because I didn't have the privilege or anything. And also, what's really interesting about the JS files is that there is a lot of calls that hasn't been released in production yet. So it's behind A/B testing. And so if you manage to detect those A/B tests, you might end up with new scope to play with, like a wider attack surface. And especially for companies that do continuous development, this is super true. So if you manage to change the A/B testing and look at all the JS files, you might end up with really simple vulnerabilities, like the basic IDOR, but just because it was so hidden inside the scope, no one found it. So yeah, definitely interesting.
Monitoring those endpoints has always been, the JS files, and then like you said, taking that extra layer, that's always been on my to-do list for automation. Soft core automation, I guess, is like, okay, I'm really interested in this one program. I'm going to set up an automation system specifically designed around their, cycle, their software development cycle, and have that pushed out. But yeah, I was going to ask as well, regarding you mentioned a when we were walking down the street to the freaking shrine earlier today to meet up with friends. You mentioned that there was this VS Code plugin that you've been using, and I imagine it actually would work well in conjunction with JSWZL.
Exactly.
And could you talk a little bit about that, because that was a really interesting product?
Yeah, so I saw the tweet of Corbin that basically used JSWZL with Cursor, and Cursor is like a wrapper around VS Code, since VS Code is mostly open source, and basically they are embedding GPT-4 inside VS Code, and you can directly ask questions about your code base. What's really interesting is that you can pay the subscription, but you can also directly natively use your GPT-4 API key, so you directly pay to OpenAI and no need to go through their servers. And it's so amazing. Like right now I'm using it to do JavaScript analysis on Google. That they use like a lot of RPC weird calls, like it's horrible proprietary protocol. And basically I'm going like, okay, that's the endpoint of the request, right? So what are the parameters? Because they are like so embedded in one function to another function to another function. And basically I just asking the AI, tell me which other function you want context to, so I can provide it to you and we can reconstruct the request. And I did that like maybe 5-6 times, and at one point I just got the request that I needed to send. And like the protobuf request, and I was like, oh, that's amazing.
And it just built it automatically for
wow. And so I used JSWZL to detect which like all the endpoints. You did some automation also to get the IDs right, and then you just ask Cursor, okay, explain to me this code. And this is the job. Like instead of having like 6 to 7 hours of code review, you do it like maybe in 2 hours. It's so great. I love it.
Wow, it's really interesting. Like I think this is something before AI or like GPT was really more, before it was as flushed out as it is. This would be something that you might have like CodeQL or maybe some more of a technical tool be doing. But the approach is basically just feeding it into AI and saying, hey, what do I need to know about this? It's so much more powerful because it can do everything just like in an instant, where it just analyzes this huge chunk of data and is able to just parse it and tell you, oh yeah, here's what you need to know.
I'm a little confused about how that works though, because I feel like the code base would extend past the context window. Do either of you guys know how that works, or is it with GPT-4 like 8K or something? I don't know.
So basically when I use it, I select the lines of code I wanted to interpret, but they natively use a way to compress the file, and basically they have like some kind of, if I understood correctly, a search engine on the client side that depending on the question will go look for the code before and then giving the context to OpenAI, so you do not have to give everything.
I see.
A bit like Bing search is doing. Like the search engine does the first request and then give the data back to OpenAI, and OpenAI will put context.
I see. Yeah, that's really interesting, because like what you meant, we were talking earlier about like tokens and sort of how like AI looks at input as tokens, and it splits it up into different segments that it can understand better, and sort of looks at those pieces individually, and then we'll build like the context together. And I think that's like what you said, like the way that it parses that is kind of counterintuitive, because you might think like, oh, I can't feed a giant file, but you can, because it can do some more processing magic on it than it would before.
I mean, like LLM are trained on so many data points that actually they can complete contexts. So if you say this function parses something, they can guess. It's not like the more accurate way to do it, but I think the Cursor team did a great job about knowing what to feed to the AI and knowing like what they already know, so you can like compress as much as possible the tokens to not pay the 8K subscription.
right. And I think combining those two tools together, JSWZL and was it Cursor? Cursor. Okay, like mouse cursor.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Combining those two tools together is a really powerful combo. So shout out to Corbin for that one. I'm definitely interested to see where all that goes. And JSWZL, I think we'll probably cover in a little bit more detail on a different episode. But I booted it up for the first time during this live hacking event, and I've been using it, and it's really cool to see it do automatically what we talked about, breaking out those web-packed JS files and having it, drop all of the things there. But I'm wondering, I don't know if you've used it, Joel, but for you, Lupin, I'm wondering how you've been using the tool, because for me, I've been having a little bit of a difficulty with it, and I talked to Charlie about this, and I think he's fixing it, but I've been having a little bit of difficulty with identifying the portions of the JS code that I really want to analyze, because there's not a search function presently. And so, I mean, do you have that same struggle? Have you worked around it? How are you using the tool currently?
The tool misses like a search function. That's definitely something that needs to be implemented. The way I use it is more about like knowing the attack surface and the constructing word list out of it. So basically, I had this GraphQL API that was behind authentication, and so it was just for admins, right? But you could, with a low privilege user, just because cookies were wildcarded, you could make a simple request to it, but without authorization, of course. And the introspection wasn't turned on. So how do you know which queries do? You go to the JS files, right? And what I did with JSWZL that was awesome, it listed all the queries. I just copied all the queries and generated word lists that I gave to Clairvoyance. And basically, Clairvoyance will try to brute force the schema, the GraphQL schema, and give it back to you. And so then I feed this 70 MO, like it was a big schema to GraphQL Voyager, and I had like everything, every call that it was being made, because they like when there is a GraphQL, everything is always documented in the front end. I don't know why there is some libraries that even have introspection inside the JS. Really? Like if it's not turned on, go check the JS and you can copy the introspection and paste it, just because they forgot to turn on a flag.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, I've seen like a lot of times, and it's so interesting.
So it's so funny you mentioned that, because I literally did the exact same thing. Except I didn't use JSWZL for it. I used my own parsing script to expand the Webpack files. And then I did exactly that. I took a regex. I pulled every string that was compliant with GraphQL. Naming standards essentially for queries and for field names and that sort of thing. And I put it all in a word list, and I fed it to Clairvoyance. And for those of you that are listening that aren't familiar, we'll link it down below. But Clairvoyance is a tool that I guess sort of plays on the problem with GraphQL, where they will recommend you fields if you have the improperly defined fields. So let's say there's a field called store, and sometimes it's even like pretty far. Like you might even get away with like sport, and it might be, did you mean store? And they'll tell you.
It really depends on the backend. So depending on the language, you can set up the amount of token that needs to be the same. So
really?
Interesting. Yeah. Sometimes it's like 2 tokens apart, so 2 letters. Sometimes it's 3, 4, and they can set up that on the backend side. And depending on the framework, they will have different kind of far away or not,
well, I mean, it's really interesting that you mentioned that strategy with GraphQL, because I was going to say the same thing about not even just GraphQL, but same thing with API requests. Like if you're pulling apart those Webpack files and the lazy loaded files, not only will you see the endpoints, but you'll also see how they're being used. Where is that data coming from? And one of the really powerful things about having all of that just right in front of you in JavaScript, it's just like Android apps where, you can decompile it. You can see how everything is working like right in front of you. You can do the same thing with the JavaScript. All you have to do is pull it apart. You can see, it's making a post request, and it builds the body with these fields that are named this, and that data comes from here. It's a parameter, and that's fed in through here. And you can track it all, and you can see sort of how that data flows through the application to get to that request. And you can piece it together without ever having used the application at all. You can do it completely from static analysis. Cool. All right. Well, but we went on a little bit of a tangent there.
I told you so. I told you
it's true. It's true. Right before we started, you were like, "We're definitely going to go on tangents here." So I feel like we should at least have you introduce yourself.
That's a good one.
Okay, listen. I turned it on, at the time that I did on purpose. We'll give you a little bit of a pre-introduction on this episode, but let's hear the self-introduction or the Jiko Shokai for you, Lupin.
So watashi wa Ronnie desu.
Oh man.
So I'm Ronnie, also known as Lupin on the internet. I've been doing security since 13 years old because I wanted to become like Arsène Lupin. I knew a bit of programming, and I read the book of Arsène Lupin, and I was like, how can I become that guy? And at the moment I read the book and I made the association with programming, I thought I created hacking. But then I learned about all the history, all the culture from the 50s and everything, and I love it so much. I started to
I was gonna say, how's that go? I mean, are you Lupin? I feel like you're Lupin. I feel like you've done that,
Lupin is a gentleman thief. I'm not stealing from anyone. Maybe stealing from companies because they're giving booty. I don't know, that's a stretch.
You're the top Lupin that I'm aware of. When I think Lupin, I think you, not anyone else. So
thanks a lot. And I started bug bounty hunting like 3.5 years ago. So 4 years, maybe. I don't remember correctly, but and it has been a wild ride. Started the live hacking scenes 1 year ago in Vegas, and it's just amazing of an experience. It's awesome.
How did you get on the live hacking event scene? Did you just open your mail one day and there was an invite, or?
I think it was like the first Ambassador World Cup because since I'm an ambassador for France, and apparently I did well. I don't think so, but they gave me an invite to Vegas. We actually won the first World Cup, even though the second one we didn't get the first one.
Like, I think I did well. They won.
Dude, I didn't get out of the first round of the World Cup either, and it's just, I don't know, man. Sometimes it's just, I'm not even gonna throw any salt, but it happens.
Yeah, it happens.
No comment.
Live hacking are way different than bug bounty. It's so tiresome. You get like 1 month straight of no social interaction anymore. Going to bed at 5 a.m., starting your day at 10 a.m. You're like,
It's so interesting seeing how things have shifted. In the very early days of live hacking events, it used to be, I mean, sometimes you wouldn't even know the scope until you got there. And it would just be like hack fest. Everybody's just like finding really cool bugs on the same day. And now it's evolved so that there's like a pre-hacking window, there's a duplication window. People are basically work 12 hours a day, sometimes more.
Definitely.
Just every single day leading up to the event, finding all these really, really crazy bugs. And then they convene together, and even more crazy bugs get found because of the minds connecting together and having these awesome discussions between hackers.
So amazing. So, something that Jonathan said, Jonathan Bowman,
Dr. Bowman.
Yeah, Dr. Bowman, that I really liked is he said that he wanted to have the show and tells before the event starts on site to inspire other people to find stuff. And I think it's an amazing idea. So imagine you 2 weeks, you're down the rabbit hole, you didn't find anything, and you have like people showing you vulnerabilities like, this is how we've done it, and like inspiring you into finding new stuff on site. That could be so awesome.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. And we always walk away from those show and tells like, your brains are just buzzing, and you're like, oh man, maybe I could apply that here or there, and then you go out and hit the bar or whatever, and then the next day you don't even check it. But that would be a really good idea.
The last show and tells in Vegas, there was Franz Frozen that had 2 show and tells back to back.
I'm so salty I missed this.
Yeah. and man, like I went out of this show and tell with an headache, like because of him. It was just so many stuff going on, and I was like, what the heck is he talking about? And I want to go back again reading his reports to get better at it, right? Because show and tells are like this. You get creativity from other people, and you don't need to do what they did, but you need to apply what you learn for your own creativity. And I really like this format because of that.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I'd say it's like maybe 25-75, like a, you know, 1/3, like 2/3 kind of split or whatever, where I'll see a bug and I'll be like, oh, I was looking at that thing, I almost thought about trying that, or maybe I did try it and I just didn't really push far enough, and I was like, I just tried it and I was like, oh, okay, well, this isn't gonna work, and I just moved on, and then that ended up being a bug. But so many other times there'll be something completely out of left field where I'm like, oh, I never would have tried, like never ever would have tried anything like that. And I sort of have to take mental notes and be like, okay, that's something that I need to see if that's going to work. Why did that work? Was it like a specific system? Was it how it was set up? What went wrong in the back end to make that happen?
There was like my first event in Vegas, there was a great show and tell from Tom Anthony, and the one in London, there was a customer that was the same one, and I remember like this feature. I'd never hacked on that customer, like on the other event I hacked on the other customer, but I remember he mentioned a really interesting feature, and so I went looking for that feature, and I was like, that's interesting. Remember what it did? And like I was remembering like the bug and everything, and I found a bypass, like a simpler version but complex, because like it was a lot of parsing requirements and stuff like that. So the payload was simpler, but it was like so hard to find. And basically because of his show and tell, I got like a bypass of one of his vulnerability from 1 year ago, and it was like, that's the purpose of show and tell, like getting new visibility and new creativity, you know?
Yeah, I think that's something that we could think about implementing in the ambassador program as well. The HackerOne ambassador program is like, if we, you're the ambassador for France, I'm the ambassador for Virginia, and I think it would be really cool after, you know, we go do a spree of hacking to have a little show and tell, you know, for our locality or whatever. Awesome. That'd be really good. And we'd learn a little bit more, you know, from all the other hackers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We'll have to think about implementing that one. Yeah.
Brainstorming session.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess bringing it back, Lupin, you recently started a company called Lupin and Holmes.
Yeah.
Beautiful website, lnh.tech. Is that what it is?
lnh.tech, yeah.
Beautiful website. Everything Lupin designs, you know, or has designed is like super gorgeous. Talk to me a little bit about that company, what your goals are for the company, how it correlates to bug bounty, that sort of thing.
So it really started like before founding this company. I was a senior security engineer at Mano Mano, so a European company, like marketplace online. And I entered that company when I was 18 years old. I did like 2 years there, and I learned so much. And I learned also like what the purpose of research in security and how it can be applied to companies. And from that learning, I was like, I need to do more research in security, right?
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt, and then we're gonna come back to that. So actually, you know, you said you were at Mano Mano. You joined when you were 18.
Yeah.
And then you left like when?
When I was 21.
21.
Yeah.
And which is now.
Yeah.
Okay,
right now,
gotcha. Yeah. And you, what was your title at Mano Mano?
Senior security engineer.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. Yeah. So how the heck did an 18-year-old just jump right into big marketplace and get to be a security? How did that work? Like, what was that process?
So basically, I was never good at school. I always hated it.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign. Yeah. And but I always wanted to do a creative job, right? And I was hacking, and someone introduced me to bug bounty, right? Actually, it was I like my teacher that told me, hey, there is this CTF. Do you want to participate? And yeah.
In high school?
Yeah, it was like a European CTF, the CISO for high schoolers from all around Europe. Okay. And I brought like 2 friends with me, and I told them, you do not have to play the CTF. I just need people from my team to go there, like to put someone on the list. And we qualified to the finals, and there was all the conferences and stuff. And there was a conference from JSWZL, right? And they were telling, hey, you can actually get paid for finding security vulnerabilities. Wow. And I was like, that's legal. That's awesome.
Yeah. Mind blowing.
Yeah. And so I got back at home, and I was like, okay, what is bug bounty? And I stumbled across HackerOne, and you could disclose vulnerabilities. And that's the only reason I went on HackerOne. So Ironically, yes, React gave me the idea to go on Hack One.
Yes.
But yeah, I really like the disclosure because actually you could share vulnerabilities and you could prove your experience, right? And so I started bug bounty hunting. It was hard at the beginning, but because of the reputation and the fact that you have a public profile, I use that as my CV, my resume, and I showed companies that, hey, I actually managed to hack those big companies, and I have the technical skills, right? And you know, I done some research. There was stuff published in the media. I did some interviews in the television. Visibility also helps. And all of that, like one day a friend of mine, Zax, told me, hey, there is this company that will hire a security engineer. They didn't open the job yet, but I recommended you. And like 2 days afterward, I got a ping, and they actually hired me before the job was open.
Wow.
And actually,
based only off of a recommendation, or did you do an interview?
I did an interview. I did several interviews with the team.
I was gonna say they saw his work and they were like, we need to hire this guy.
I did several interviews. They were great, really funny interviews actually. And Jules, that was my manager, not the one that you know, but like he was so great with me. He's also really young at the time. I think he was 24, and he was my manager, and I was his first employee. And we had like a great relationship. He helped me grow, and you know that led to research and to creating my own company. So basically, my brother has like a similar stories with studies. He never like he did 7 years of first years of college, right? He
what, 7 times?
Yeah, he like because he was bored of it, and so he did like actually the first years of my other brothers in law, like in laws stuff and in philosophy, and he never liked anything. But my father one day said, "Hey, you don't know anything about programming, about development. You barely know how to use a computer, but there is like the 42 school network that opened, like it was like really new at the time in 2017, I think." And he said to him, go do that school. And basically it's a school without teachers, and there is no courses. Like you just have exercises of programming, and you do not need to know programming to get into that school. It's 100% free, and the school is open 24/7.
Wow.
So to get into that school, you need to pass a logical test, and then you have something called the piscine, which is the pool. And the pool, basically you have 1 month of intensive programming where you need to learn from scratch to become like an expert in C and C++.
Oh wow. Okay.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
And if you pass all the tests, you get in the school. Right. So it's hardcore mode. You need to try out.
And what's sort of the incentive to like pass that test? Is there some sort of like, is it very exclusive? Is there like a certain like, once you're there, it helps you get a better job? Or why would people want to push through that and learn C and C++ and stuff in order to get there?
You learn so much in a condensed time. So in 1 month, you actually know how to program fully in C and C++, which is astonishing, like what they managed to do. And in 1 year, you can get a job for the better students, or otherwise in 2-3 years. But you do not need any degrees, and you will get hired by companies. So that's the incentive. Like you do not know what to do with your life, go to that school if you like remotely computers. And he actually did, and he became like a good backend developer, really good. And he worked for many different startups, and you know, we were talking and you know sharing knowledge about our jobs. And one time we're like, I do research in security, you do development. We need to do something. We need to do something
together.
And so we wanted to create that R&D company. And because my nickname was Lupin, we needed to find a nickname for him. And like Holmes was the perfect one.
Like Sherlock.
And it goes really good with him because I guess Holmes used deduction. Like when you are programming, you need to, find the best path to create something. And Holmes is really like that. And also my brother do not like to talk in the medias, do not like the fame. He exactly like Sherlock Holmes. They were like, this is like the great persona for him, right?
Yeah.
And so Lupin and Holmes is really about, you know, trying to complete one another. We are opposite sides, but like the opposites of a coin, right? We just a coin is like
they must be together, but never at the same time.
Exactly. And so I use Bug Bounty as a way to do research, and then everything that I learned from Bug Bounty about, you know, maybe fixing vulnerabilities or finding the vulnerabilities, I then ask my brother to code tools, and then those tools are going to become products that we are going to sell to companies, maybe to bug hunters, but mostly for companies.
So you've got you know, on that line, you've got a secret product that we won't talk about on this episode, but we will be talking about on a future episode. And your brother is primarily doing the coding for that.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
He's doing
I didn't know
the entire backend.
Wow.
And it's pretty good because sometimes I ask him to do something security related, and he's like, why? Like, why would anyone try that? And I'm like, that's the whole purpose of the research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. And so I guess, how is it with you then, working with somebody else's code? Because for me, like, especially within my automation framework, I feel like I need to know the ins and outs of it. And even sometimes when I look at a piece of code that I wrote like 4 years ago, it's like, you know, who the frick wrote this?
Yeah.
You know, before Joel started influencing my Python programming. So, I mean, has that worked all right for you? I mean, have you written any of the code yourself?
I've written some of the code, mostly for the clients, but not for the backends. I think it's better if I do not touch the code. Not because
that's what he tells you, at least.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Don't touch the code.
Yeah, and it's more like we need to separate our jobs. Like my job is to actually find new ways to do research, and his job is to develop. And it's actually good that I do not touch the code, because I'm doing like a bit of the product manager. Like I ask things that are not possible, and he needs to find a way to do them.
Yeah, I actually love that sort of that separation of roles, where normally you would say like research and development is sort of like globbed into one thing, where, you know, you're doing research and you're developing, but research and like one of you is doing research, one of you is doing development, and it sort of allows you to have a singular focus and really hone in on that. Because one of the things that we've talked about is you know, there's the XKCD, right, where it's about automation, and it's, you know, over time, all of your time starts to get taken up by having to maintain and manage this system. And that is going to take away from the amount of time that you have to do research and actually learn new things, learn new techniques, and explore and find new bugs and that kind of stuff. And so if you can separate that out and say, here, you manage with the development, I'll manage with the research, that really allows each of you to sort of hone in that craft to 100%.
I would take an example of a proof of concept that we are doing right now. Basically, there was like this target that is renowned for blind XSS. And I was like, we need to find a way to automate blind XSS, but not in the way that do dumb automation about just, you know, putting everything out there and just see what will happen, but like, you know, try to find the right payload for the right context. And this is hard, but I know that some hunters are really good at understanding how the panel, like admin panel side works, right? And they know the right payload to it. And I was like, we can do some detection out of it, right? And so I asked him to create a semi-automation tool. So I don't like to automate everything. I like to, you know, understand what I'm doing and to have, you know, hands on everything happening on the process. But there are things that, you know, like finding the right payload and putting it, writing it again, or copy pasting, it takes so much time. And so we created like this blind access framework where basically you can put templates and you have your own config files, and you can actually put, you know, in the request templates, it would do some smart match and replace to actually put the right payload. And so you do not need to know the payload by heart, just create your templates and you go for it. And this tool is highly modulable. And right now we are giving it to a few bug hunters to test it and see like what people need out of it. One feature that I really would like to do is that creating data flows, like request flows, better said, where, for instance, there is blind exercise that may happen in the checkout, right? And that's something it's really hard to automate. And what I want to do is, like, from the login up to the checkout, you could record all the requests, and so replay all the requests, and
like
say,
logging in, adding a product, going to checkout, and then
but you modify one request at a time. And if the request is not like, since you record the request and response, if the response is not expected, you drop the entire flow and you start from the beginning with a new request.
Almost like fuzzing.
Almost like fuzzing, but in a way that you keep the logic of, you know, adding a product in your cart, and then from the cart you are paying.
I should have said more like symbolic execution, where it's like you have a certain flow and you say it has to meet all of this specific criteria, and if so, this is a success case.
Exactly.
So I'm a little bit curious. How does that flow correlate to blind XSS? Are you trying to get the application into different states where you think that it may trigger some sort of appearance in a log on an admin panel or something like that? Or
there was a research from someone that was really interesting about using Log4j, like trying to trigger Log4j payloads, but in a real weird situation. And basically, like, the research was about doing error-based requests. So you will trigger a lot of requests. You will try to, you know, get banned, your IP banned, stuff like that, and put, you know, beacons in the headers, stuff like that. Everything that the app shouldn't do, you try to do it in order to generate a log. And those kind of flows that I'm saying, like,
or like an incident or something like that. Like, someone look at this guy, he's doing something weird, and then that.
Exactly, and that will trigger the flow. For instance, you have a checkout page and you put a product. Maybe imagine that the API, you can change the product name or the cart name, and that's that. You know, you need to test those kind of things, but it takes so much time to test all the different possibilities that my dream will be to have those data flow.
And when you say possibilities, do you mean, because this is going back to what you were saying earlier about a payload, are you talking about like payload, like using a polyglot payload for like where it will trigger on the admin side, or are you talking about
at the entry point, like the parameter that you are
so
changing?
You're saying, okay, you know, log in, add a product, go to the cart, change the cart name, submit the order, and then the payload's in the cart name, and then go back, do it again, and but at this time we do it in the notes,
shipping,
the order notes,
the shipping,
exactly. Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, that would be a really cool automated flow.
Yeah, we're still working on that. It's a lot of work, and especially
sessions make that very difficult. Exactly. It's interesting because I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but I didn't even use Nuclei or like HTTPX or anything until like a couple weeks ago, and I think one of the things that really pushed me over the edge to start doing that is that I, like you did, basically entirely manual testing for a very long time. I would focus on specific things. I would see weird behavior and I would chase that down. And I came to a point where I realized, like, I need to do more breadth, but it doesn't have to be necessarily in depth. Like, if I just want to identify, oh, this host is online, I don't have to go open 15 tabs. I can just run a tool that does that automatically and make my life a little bit easier. And then maybe I can do some manual testing to figure it out, or I can take a polyglot payload or you know, a tool like what you're writing and use that to even go one step further and narrow down my scope even more.
Well,
well, go ahead.
What's interesting about automation is that there is, in my opinion, 3 ways of doing bug bounty. You have full manual, so you just check the request one by one.
This is exactly what I was going to say. Good.
There is full automation, where you basically trust your servers and computers to do everything, and there is, like, where I kind of see it, semi-automation. So my problem with automation is that it's not becoming like about getting creative with vulnerability and understanding the scope. It's about doing a race against all the people that does automation. You do not need to have the most accurate result. You need to be the first one, right? For instance, the subdomain takeover scene is really like that right now. So if someone has a specific automation and someone maybe know how to code in Go or Rust, this person will get the subdomain first, right? and that's not in the way that I like to do hacking, but
Right.
you can be really good at it, right?
Right.
There is manual testing where it's really long. You need to go thorough. You made a tweet about, knowing the application till you get sick of it.
Yes.
And I'm sick of getting sick of
Yes,
applications.
100%. Yeah.
And-
because it's such a
yeah.
grind. Like I think
Exactly.
we've talked about this a lot. Like you have to get intimate with the application, right? Got to get intimate with it. But that, some applications, the amount of features, the amount of depth there is to an application, that can take weeks, maybe even months to fully understand every little piece. I'm thinking about like is a great example where, such a huge, complicated application where it can take so long to get a full grasp of how does this thing work? How do these systems connect together?
Sure.
And if you aren't using tools to your advantage to sort of take, jump up 5 stairs, up or whatever, right? Like you just have to kind of use some of the tools that are out there, because even though it might feel like, I really want to just do this manually. I don't want to, let the tools tell me what to do. It's really worth it. It's worth your time, and
Definitely.
it's worth the amount of effort and energy that you're going to spend, days, weeks, whatever it would, to
Sure.
learn that application, just to, get one step ahead. Because, the subdomain takeover is a great example. I know tons of people who do automation for that kind of stuff, and that's not really what my focus is, right? Like I understand, like, you could maybe code up a really fast example, but you're starting at the beginning compared to all these people who've been automating for a very long time. They're already multiple steps ahead. And instead you could focus on something that is deeper, that the automation is not necessarily going to pick up, but you can get there by taking a couple shortcuts, right? You can learn some of the nuance to that application without having to go through the whole manual process. And from the very beginning, I think about it kind of like learning a language, right? This is a great example, because you've been learning Japanese, and it's like, it's instead of learning one word at a time and then we're learning 2,000 words and then being like, okay, now I'm gonna try and say hello, my name is Joel. Like it's like learn hello, my name, right? Just hello, my name is.
The pieces that actually help you in your daily life. That's like a really good example with Japanese, is that instead of understanding like every word, what I'm trying to do is actually say sentences that I will use during my trip. Like, for instance, I want this thing, kureo kudasai. Like, and that's it. Like, I do not need to know everything, but
for the record, he's been learning Japanese for like 4 days.
Very, very, very fast picker. Like he picked it up so fast.
Oh yeah, I can't have a discussion yet. So that's my goal in 2 weeks, But yeah, like this is a good example. For instance, you also, like with semi-automation, you need to know what is worth automating. For instance, yesterday we were looking with Justin on Google, and Google has a lot of proprietary protocols, and is it worth automating? At one point, we were asking this question. This application we want.
I asked you this exactly. I was like, Lupin, is this? We read a great write up on essentially how it works, which we'll link. And we were like, okay, so do we want to build essentially a burp extension surrounding making this much easier to test, or do we want to just look at take our knowledge of the protocol and essentially just every single time burn that additional mental cycles to translate in our brain to what we're seeing, and that was a discussion we had, and I think that's a really important discussion to have for automation. Yesterday we landed on building the automation because we those mental cycles really inhibit creativity in hacking. And this is something we talk about on the podcast a lot, but anytime you can reduce friction to testing, you want to be able to, ideally in an ideal world, you want to be able to have an idea, oh, what if I did this? And then test that immediately. And that's what we're kind of shooting for with that. So it's exciting for sure.
What's really interesting about this specific application and why we went on the automation route of it is because this application used this Google proprietary protocol called batch execute to doing RPCs call, but this is not the only application that use this protocol. And so basically, if we build automation with that specific app in example, like for instance, you went like for manual testing, and I went from automating what he learned from the manual testing. And so if we have a good proof of concept with that application, every other Google application
100%.
using that protocol, we be able to assess it faster and to understand it better.
Right.
And so that's what was the reason why
we're coming for you, Google.
and that was the reason why the automation made sense. But at the same time, we didn't went on the route of, okay, we're going to get all the requests from the JavaScript and then play it and fuzz them. It's just like getting all the requests and having like a template of what to send, and then we can do manual testing. So we save hours of reverse engineering the JavaScript for concentrating only on the creativity part, not the searching, but on the, hey, is there pollution on that parameter? What if I put this ID here? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I want to say as well, it just before we jump into something else, but it's very tempting to think about it like a math equation. Like, okay, am I going to save brain sort of CPU cycles by spending, let's say, 3 hours up front to build the automation, right? Is that going to save me 3 hours worth of time? And I thought about it like that for a while, but then I realized this is really not the best way to think about it, because precisely we're not catching and quantifying that whole piece of like how much it's inhibiting our creativity or inhibiting our attack vector formulation to constantly be having to, all right, now I got to URL encode this, and I got to stick this in this little JSON blob, and I got to fix the escaping and blah, 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 blah. And so, I think oftentimes like that, especially when you're committing to a target for a longer period of time, even if you think you won't necessarily get that time back, you will get ROI on that because your brain will work more efficiently in that environment.
That's true.
Yeah, 100%. I've also done some hacking on Google maybe like a month ago. And I ran into a very, very similar situation where just like the entry point to hacking, it can be very difficult because of these specific protocols and these weird formats that they use. And so it's not so much that you're building out like a tool that's going to automate the entire thing, but it's really almost just like a helper script, right? It's like in the same way that Burp has a pretty tab and a raw tab, right? You can just make it format it for you, or you can make it decode that for you, or make it readable for you, so that when you hover over the request or when you're scrolling through, you can identify and you can pattern match manually significantly faster and easier than you would by doing it over and over again manually and being like, hold on, where's that weird byte that I'm looking for? Okay, there's the type, and just that is very mentally draining. And it's just like having like sometimes I'll do it with Python. I'll just write like a little function or a script or something, and I'll have it in my terminal, and I'll just have it like read from my clipboard or something to do it automatically, and that's so much easier than like writing an entire piece of tooling out.
Definitely.
Yeah, actually, Joel, I steal it from you because I actually want you to talk about that a little bit, because that's like one of the coolest things that I've seen about your hacking methodology. So essentially, and please expand, but he's got a set of functions that he's built over time, and then you essentially just open up the Python terminal, it reads from the clipboard, and then you can kind of chain together these automations, right?
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. I have a little module I call PyHack, and basically whenever I use IPython as my terminal, and essentially I'll just import this file, and it has a bunch of they're like aliases, like bash aliases for me, but they're more complex, and it's easier for me to write in Python than it is in bash. And it'll do stuff like URL decode or slash escape. Like a common scenario is I'll copy something that has /ns in it, right? And I want to see it I want to see them literally as /n. So I have just a little helper function that takes them, decodes them, and prints it out manually.
That's awesome.
And just to make it like so much easier. HTML decoding, hex encoding, hex decode, and just little tiny helper things, things to group stuff. These are the types of like very little, nuance that makes it so much easier.
And you have them for everything.
Yeah,
which is
so all sorts of things.
Me.
Yeah,
like every single time I'm like, oh, okay, Joel's gonna have to code something, like because we pair hack, from time to time. So like, I see your screen, when you do this. And I'm like, all right, this time he's gonna have to do like some like dot replace shit or something like that.
Yep.
No, every single time you've got a function for it.
Yes, yeah.
On that note, on the pair hacking, I was sitting in front of them at the PayPal event, and it's just the best thing ever to watch them, both of them, all day on one single problem.
Oh my god!
Like, I haven't seen that many use of muscular faces over the day. Like both of them were like, oh. Why? What? It's like I figured it out. Oh no! Yes! No! that was just so funny. But you guys really complete one another, and I think it really works well for you.
Yeah, I think pair hacking works specifically well for Joel and I. Like,
Yeah.
I think I like to say it. I point Joel, at the thing, like, Joel, brain power that, like.
To be honest, I think that like every person's like doing bug bounty needs a pair hacker with them, and that's what we've seen in the top bug bounty hunter community. Like if you see Franz Rosen, Matthias Carlsen, if you see Jonathan, there's Sean, and like everyone is like there is one hacker that always with you.
100%. Yeah, I mean it's like so we've always said like two brains are better than one, and this doesn't have to be an in-person thing. I think one of the advantages of being in person is that you can feed off of each other. Like we don't even like there'll be things that we just don't even like talk, like we'll just be like looking at the same thing and we'll be picking up things at the same pace, and I'll be like, oh, did you see that? And you'll be like, yeah, that's really interesting. and it's like, what's that? Right? But it's like we're just sort of on that level where we're able to sort of go, and when you get to that point, your efficiency is literally 2x or more because you have two people, two perspectives. Like he has seen things that I haven't seen. I've seen things that he hasn't seen. I know techniques that he doesn't know. He knows techniques that I don't know.
You've got little scripts that can encode things faster, and I can't.
Right, and he knows, like he's like, oh, just here, do this. I found it, like just run this thing, and I'm like, what? I don't even know how this works. Whatever, I'll just run it.
Like last time in Vegas, I met Matthias Carlsen, and we were talking about that, and he told me what you need to do is to find someone with the same technical skill as you, but at the same time that can complete you. Like you do not need a mentor. You need someone to grow with you,
right?
And like that's something that a lot of beginners have trouble with, is that I need someone to learn from, and that's not the fact. Like you need someone to learn with in order to grow up together. And I think that's the best part of hacking, when you can just critical think.
Right. Honestly, one of the most amazing things that I see, especially with like mentor relationships, it's not always like mentors. So many times I'll be mentoring like someone who's new to bug bounty, and they will ask what might seem as a simple question, but I'm like, why haven't I ever thought about that? Like, why, like, I just made like some sort of assumption because I'm more advanced, and I just like was like, oh, it's definitely going to behave this way. And the beginner will be like, is it going to behave that way? And I'm like, actually, is it? Right? Like, I should probably look and check. And that, again, it's like, you are learning with them. You're growing together. It's not just like, oh, let me teach you this, right? Like some of it is that, but it's also you have to feed off of each other and be willing to open and change your perspective and learn new techniques.
Yeah, that's actually how I learned hacking. Like I went on Discords, like beginner Discords, because I was a beginner at the time, and all the questions that the beginners, I was trying to answer them, but not like I was doing the RTFM for them, and I was like, all the questions that they have is question that I will have, and if I can answer them right now, when I will confront it, it will be easier for me.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think that's like, if you do not have anyone to learn with, it's great to do it that way, because you have like so much question from all over the people, like getting access to attack surface that you do not have. Like for instance, hey, what is this protocol? Hey, what is this? Can you hack it? And like I just went like grinding for like 3-4 months, and by the end of the day, you get actually like a good skills about what an attack surface is, and when you are going on bug bounty hunting, it's easier for you and you feel safer.
Yeah. So much of this goes back to like when I try and describe how you should be picking up hacking, it's really, you should be in the beginning, question everything, right? Like, what is HTTP? What is this get/HTTP/1 point? What does this mean? Like, what is this structure? Why does it look this way? How does it behave? How does it get interpreted? When I click a button, what's happening?
Oh man!
And like just breaking that down and understanding it at a like fundamental level builds those core building blocks that you can then use forever, right? Just like what you said, like building out a tooling that will make your life easier when you're testing some specific protocol. It just sets the ground floor so that you can go up from there and you have a solid foundation.
Like that happened to me when I was trying to use a bypass for SSRF, and basically I went, on the cheat sheet and took like a octal bypass, like basically the IPs in octal format, and you put it, and I was like, what is this format? And so I went directly at the source, the core of it, the RFC of IP, and it started at 6 p.m. and ended up at 5 a.m. The freaking rabbit hole of what the heck is an IP. But by the end of the day, it helped me so much to bypass stuff, because an IP can be so many things. It just needs to be a 32-bit integer. But they do not specify how, like if it's in an hexadecimal, in octal, like the point, the 4 dots format is just, a convention. But actually, every caller needs to interpret all the different kind of formats, which is insane. And when you know that, you know how to actually bypass those kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And those sort of tricks are the only, you're going to find those tricks by diving deep and getting far into those.
Yeah, we had a thread recently, like you just gave me a domain and said, oh, there's an XSS on it. Just try to find it. Yeah. And like 1 hour later, I was like, oh, that was a really cool challenge. But we didn't have like we didn't have the same answer to that challenge. Yeah. And like we looked at it and we're like, why your payload works?
Yeah.
And actually created a lot of debates on Twitter.
Yeah, I actually saw something like this recently. Somebody made a great Twitter post. We'll have to find it. I don't remember who it was, but they showed an example of a command injection where you could encode the command in this really, really weird. It was like there was like backslashes before each letter, and it's like all sorts of weird things. I looked at it, I was like, how the heck does this even work? Yeah. And I actually bookmarked it because I need to go back later and I need to figure out how it works. And it's one of those things where you're like, if you can figure out fundamentally how this works, the fundamental parts of why it's working and what's going on there apply in other scenarios. You don't have to do it exactly like the exact same way, but you can use those pieces together to build it. And I think this is a great transition because you made a video recently about UUID v1 and you want to talk about like deep dive and like understanding like weird nuance in something that seems very typical. UUID v1 versus UUID v through 2, 3, 4. It's a lot of nuance in there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I was hacking with Snorlax, like the French team. We really hack a lot together, and this target we really hammered it for months and months, right? And we knew everything, and this target had everything in scope, so even third parties and acquisitions, and so we were on this new acquisition that wasn't explicitly in scope, and he was like, oh, that's weird, like the password reset is on another domain, and he just linked it to me, and I was like, wait a minute, that's a UID v1. And why did that trigger is because I don't know why and I don't know how, but I think it was because I was programming something that needed UID. I was like, what's the difference between v4 and v1, right? Actually, it's because at Mano Mano, we were fixing a third-party stuff that had collision with v4. And I was like, what's the difference with UID anyway? And I found this blog post from Versprite's team, actually talking about UID v1 being generated on timestamps, and I was like, that doesn't seem secured, and it doesn't like just use timestamps. It also uses the MAC address and the clock ID of the machine. So the MAC address is basically the MAC address in hexadecimal format. So if the same machine generates two UIDs, it will stay the same. The clock ID is the same. It's a value that is set at the creation of a machine, like the first boot, and it will always stay the same. So you actually have like two chunks of the UID that always stay the same. And the last chunks are the version. So if it's UID v1, you will see that the third chunk, the first number will be the version. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's the first thing I look at whenever I see a UUID is like third octet, first character. And if it's a 4, I go, and if it's a 1, I go, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, when you see 1, you know that it's generated on timestamps, right? And so then you see that the third chunk is actually the high, and then you have the mid and the low. And I don't know exactly why they are called like that, but when you are put together, like you just concatenate them, it's doing hexadecimal value, and this hexadecimal value, when you put it in decimal, give you a time step in the Julian calendar. So I went on the internet searching why the Julian calendar, and I didn't find the reason. Like, why the heck would you use that calendar? Use epoch like normal people, you know? And then you can, you know, do some basic math. I'm really bad at math, so of course those have to be basic. And to put it in the epoch timestamp, and then you get the date with a normal converter, and like you can have like some kind of disclosure of when this ID has been generated. Right. And now they use UUID v1 for the password reset, and UUID v1, since you can know the time that have been generated, and you can reconstruct them really easily, because it's just, you know, trying to do +1 in the hexadecimal values. You can actually do something called the sandwich attack. So basically you generate a password reset for the attacker, then you generate one for your victim, and again for the attacker. And the attacker part is the layer of bread, and the victim is like the ham, the garniture, everything. And you basically sandwiched the reset token of your victim between your two tokens. And someone asked me, why do you need the other layer? Like, you can just put the first one and the victim one, and you can just brute force until you have the victim. It's just to give you a sense about if your script is working. Like, if you go over, if you go over that value, it means that you didn't find the ID, right? And so there is another thing going on, so that's why it's better to sandwich.
That's awesome. So much of this reminds me of CTFs. CTF, like security CTFs, do such a good job with these weird things. Stuff like UUID1 is a great example where there's weird nuance to how things that might seem intuitive work, and that makes it perfect for a CTF, where it'll be like, hey, look at this piece of code. This looks completely normal, but what's wrong with it? Right? And you have to go, wait a second. What is wrong with this? Oh, it's UUID v1. And why is that vulnerable? Oh, because you can use timestamps, and you can predict the next value and so forth. And having that type of training, even though it's not like a bug bounty, it's very, very related, and it builds some of that like fundamental knowledge and the understanding of those weird technologies, which honestly, they're weird, but they're used in the real world so often that it's not like a useless thing to know. It's a very, very useful, powerful piece of thing to learn. And
also, I was just going to ask about that. Like, when you're there was a really cool comment on the Twitter post for that, and essentially it was saying, using the new smashing the state stuff.
Yeah, I've seen the comments.
So, okay. Well, we'll say it for those that are listening and haven't seen it. One of the comments on Twitter said, using the smashing the state research that James Kettle recently released, you should be able to get sub 1 millisecond, almost collisions with your requests, right? They can be processed within the same millisecond. Assuming that process is generating a UUID v1, UUID, do you know if they will collide, or how will that work? Do you know?
So UUID v1s are on the nanoseconds.
Okay, so no.
So
never.
I don't,
James, do your shit and make it faster, James.
It might collide, but like I don't really know the probability of that. But I think that was a really interesting comment, because that's basically have you seen like the article from James Kettle about so you want to be a security researcher, and he says you need to go hunt for forgotten knowledge, so stuff that other people missed, like for many, many years. For instance, DNS rebinding, 2005, everyone was using DNS rebinding, and then it got lost, and someone was like, what if it works on the client side, like of browsers? And like
DNS rebinding, that makes me remember something.
Hunt for
forgotten. I've heard that name in years.
and try to create diversity from this forgotten knowledge. So basically, this applied the logic of a vulnerability to other type of technologies and stuff like that. That DNS routing is a prime example of that. And then you have to get outside of your comfort zone. Your own comfort zone is the same as many other people. And so if you get outside of your comfort zone, you will be on untouched territory. And this kind of comments about, hey, can we take this research and this other research and smash them together? Go for it. No idea is stupid until proven wrong. And so I thought that this comment was so great. And kudos to the person that thought about it.
Totally agree with that. Always looking for those sort of opportunities to combine those two pieces together and generate something new. So we're getting close to what time is it actually? 10:45. Okay, we need to wrap up soon. But I did want to ask one last thing regarding your experiences at live hacking events. Like you said, we all have these people that we collaborate with that help and that we kind of complete, right, and complete us. So you collaborate often with the French team.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics and what kind of lessons you've learned from that collaboration?
Yeah. The French team is super great. We didn't have a better name than just the French team. So the croissant team now there. And
the croissant man.
The baguette.
The baguette.
The baguette.
Dude. That's it.
Okay. I'm going to brainstorm with them.
That'll be great.
Yeah. And we have an interesting
I'm actually really proud of that.
You should be. Oh man, the royalties are going to be expensive on that one. It's actually really great because on every live hacking event, we always manage to invite one of the team.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the team is composed at least of 5 people. So we have Doomer, Zax, that they both work at the BZ Hunt. They created the company. We have Snorlax, who is an amazing hunter. There is Bonsoir Day, who is an upcomer, but he did some amazing job with OpenSea recently.
Yeah.
Crits after crits, right?
Yeah.
And there is me. And
which speaks for itself.
And me, of course.
And
needless to say,
I'm saying that because we are so different in our ways to hunt. For instance, Zax is really methodological about the way, like he does everything on a checklist. Like I'm going to check that, then that, then that. Doomer is really good at spreading and finding attack surfaces. Snorlax is really good about finding specific vulnerabilities and also finding some weird stuff. And I think I'm good about finding new research. And so what happened is that Snorlax and I it's like a Counter-Strike esports team. Like we are with Snorlax the pivot. Like we are going on another direction while they are hunting on the main scope, right? And we are like doing some crazy weird stuff. And once we find something interesting, we give it to them to first to Doomer to find an attack surface and to spread this vulnerability everywhere, and then to Zax to add to the checklist of things to check and everything.
This reminds me of, Shubs especially is a great example because his recon game is insane, and he'll just find like 15 different like weird things, and he'll be like, "Hey man, I have this weird thing. Like, do you want to go check it out?" I'm like, yeah. And just like how Justin was saying, I'll like point Joel in the right direction. It's very much so like that, where like you'll find a lead and you'll be like, I think we can get this, but like, let me let you take a crack at it because I know you can do it.
Shubs is like, you get a weird thing, you get a weird thing, you get a weird thing.
Oprah of Recon, I love it. But yeah, like the way the dynamics works, we are everyone. Each one of us have their own role, and the Counter-Strike team is amazing because it's a good example because you have the guys doing the entry points, you have the other one doing the support, and you have like the lurkers that are going to another direction. And that's basically what we're trying to apply within the team. We do not want to be on, all looking at the same thing. We want to
overlapping,
overlapping. And for instance, at the Epic Games event at the beginning of the year, we were all looking at different stuff, and there was like this moment where, hey, I got this thing working. Do you think that on your scope it would work? And we spread that shit everywhere, and it worked everywhere. And that's the dynamic like we want to do, and we do not any overlap, so that works great. And also we are like really, really great friends, and we love to when we're hunting 10 days in a row, not sleeping, the last day we have mental breakdown and just at 2 a.m. not managing to write a report, and like just someone breathing to the microphone makes us laugh for hours and hours. And we're like, this is like the greatest thing ever about like being with your friends and not just working.
It's definitely an amazing experience. And I wanna talk, because last time, maybe it was last episode or the episode before, I talked a little bit about some of the difficulties of collaboration. Just to be clear, I am not I'm not anti-collaboration. I just think that there are some challenges, and it seems like you and some of the other people that have been doing collaboration successfully, consistently, have really ironed out those details. And I think that's awesome. And if you do it in a way that's intentional and aligns with everyone's goals, then it rocks. And I experienced that as well. So it's great to see you doing that.
What I like with collaboration, like I like to do, for instance, when I'm not collaborating with the French team, is that from the beginning I say like, how do you want to collaboration? How do you want to split? And before even finding vulnerabilities, so you set everything straight. And what I like to do is, even if the other person does not find anything, but I know that they're actively searching, I want to still give them 50% of the report, because I know that if I continue collaborating with that person, and that if I trust the person, they will do the same thing for me, and we're going to balance out bounties over the time. And that's how you create real bond and friendship. It's not about money, it's about having human interaction with one another, and trust. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I think that's like a perfect note to end it on. I mean, was there anything you want to shout out? Obviously, your company, what is it, L&H or LNH?
Lupin and Holmes, LIANDH.tech for the website. I just want to say thank you guys for everything you've been doing on the podcast. It's just amazing, all the debates that is created, like the one about programs, the one about collaboration. I love it. That's what we needed in the community. So shout out to you guys for everything you've been doing.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you for being on. We really appreciate it. And that's the pod, right?